So, hi and welcome to the Firefly Adda, your virtual conversation starter, a platform where we showcase different thought leaders and bring out insights and learnings. In today's episode, we talk about the art of storytelling and why it is essential, and who better than our guest, Mr. Vikram Sridhar, storyteller and theater practitioner. Hi, Vikram, and welcome to the Firefly Adda.
Hi, Kushagra, and thanks for having me in the show.
Thank you, Vikram. So, the first essential aspect of storytelling, I think we need to actually understand, first of all, what really storytelling is all about. So, is there sort of a defined approach to what storytelling is, or is it very loose in terms of how it is actually defined?
Well, I mean, it's a term that's been used by everybody. I mean, in today's world, I mean, everybody does use the word storytelling. But where I would make it simple is any conversation or any communication that connects two people through a story is storytelling. I mean, telling is oral, and story is like a bowl. So that's storytelling.
And is it really relevant in these present times?
Absolutely, because even like look at, I mean, any of our social media is happening now. There will be always be the word story somewhere. So it could be WhatsApp, it could be Facebook, it's Insta stories. So it's much more relevant today because people are distancing in a very different way. So stories connect us much in a very shorter way than ever before.
Great. So, any sort of attributes which actually define what a great storytelling session really could be? Any qualities that a particular storytelling person should actually possess in any way?
So if we go back in time, we come from a culture, especially in Indian culture, where people used to sit together. There used to be separate spaces in the house where we used to just sit in. I mean, maybe in a looser word, gossip or just share. And stories are a way we used to gossip, saying, "Hey, you know what? This happened to that person. That happened. This happened to that person," and then it becomes interesting. But sometimes when we talk about ourselves, we lose words, and that's how stories started as metaphors. I mean, instead of saying it happened to me, I'll say it happened to a, let's say, dog, and then it becomes easier. And when we use that, it gets more easier. And the best or the easy part of storytelling could be is just being ourselves in it. So the best quality of a storytelling session or a storyteller would be to be ourselves, and that's the most comfortable part. It could be in a corporate setting or it could be a public setting. The moment you're yourself, it's very easy to flow.
So, what you're saying is, if you actually be yourself, you can actually better connect with the audience, and the flow comes out really well. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Great. So, one of the traits which I believe is essential in storytelling is, you really need to captivate the audience and fascinate them. Yeah. So, what are the ingredients which actually necessarily go into a good storytelling, session? So, is there any examples that you can actually talk about from your experiences? You've actually done so many such storytelling sessions. So, any such memories, any such examples that you would want to, bring out, which has actually, got you into the idea of really fascinating the audience. Yeah.
Let me tell you a story for that itself. So, because storyteller should use
Sure.
story, so I'll use story as a metaphor to tell
Sure.
about that. So, once upon a time, there was a big kingdom, and of course, because it's a big kingdom, there was a palace, and in the palace there was a king and a queen, and a visitor came and gave them a gift. The visitor gave them a gift of two birds, and these two birds were something like the kite, which was huge, which was large, which was had a good wingspan. And the king and the queen called the gardener and told the gardener to let the birds out in the garden so that they could fly and they could be there whenever they visit the garden. So the gardener took the birds and left it on the tree so that they could fly around. And after a few days, the king and the queen came and they could only see one bird flying. The other bird was not flying. The other bird was just sitting and like to itself. The king and the queen thought, maybe another day, maybe another day, maybe another day. But the bird didn't fly. And they got a little upset, saying, "What's wrong with this bird? This bird is supposed to fly, but it's not flying. It's a large wingspan. It's a raptor. It has to fly." Okay. And then the gardener tried, the soldiers tried, the ministers tried, everybody tried, nothing had happened. And finally, they gave up and they said, "What do we do?" Then the gardener said, "Why don't you call somebody from this town who has been here for a long time, who knows these birds much better, who looks at them from time from their forefathers? Then they will know." And so they called one such person, and the person came, and the person spent a night. And the next day, when the king and the queen came, they saw the bird flying. They said, "Wow, what have you done? Something that you, but we tried everything. We tried money, we tried this, we did that, we did nothing worked. How come you just came and did it?" And this so-called learned person said, "You tried everything. What I did was cut the branch on which the bird was sitting." So that's the story. I mean, that's as much as to understand to understand. And sometimes when we cut our comfort zone, we all fly. So a story is, like I said, a bowl which transports between two people. I can give it in a plastic plate, I can give it in a steel plate, I can give it in a very nice porcelain, and the content is the same. So a story is something like how carefully I transfer communication, what you would call, between two human beings. And the best two gadgets in the world, which can never be done in a lab, is this body and this voice. So how much ever we try to do it in science, we let the can happen in any big university, you can't replicate this voice and this body. And this is the most important and the most relevant in today's time. This body, which is like the YouTube, uh, I'm sorry, the PPT, and whereas this voice, which is the YouTube, and these two together makes a story effective in today's time when we have all the gadgets. Still, this is more relevant.
Fantastic, Vikram. I think I was actually a little spellbound by the story, itself, and that sort of fascinated me as well. So I think that's, a great approach to how you sort of, bring out the essence of your story. Now, the next question could be primarily around, how do you actually build out your content? So is there some sort of an inspiration or a spark or an ignite which actually brings out the essence of a good storyline, or you actually read and research a lot and then sort of build your storyline based on that?
So the beauty is the best stories or the entire creativity of humankind is already done. I mean, we've already finished having the best. Even if you go to a bookstore today, you will find the best stories are the old wine in the new bottle, which could be our epics, which could be our old story was rewritten. So one simple thing for the story is a story is very simple. I mean, it can be a 10 seconds Twitter, or it could be a 100-page book. It's just starting, middle, end. That's all. It starts, something happens, and it ends. Either you come back to the starting point or you end in a different place, reformed or changed. That's it. You take a movie, you take a book, you take a storytelling, the same format. If you want to have it for 4 hours, you put masala, you put more people, you put more characters, you put more episodes, and you put more incidents and make it long. Or if it's a 10 seconds, like what is the story that is shared, you have a starting, you have the king and the kingdom, you have a problem, you have an ending where they come back to the starting place where the bird did flew and happily so-called ever after. That's all. So, and with keeping in this line, you can change the kite into a tiger, it will work. You put that into put the king and the queen into, let's say, a politician, it could work. So it's just changing of this, because the end of it, human problems are still the same. It's about relationship. We're trying to only solve that in irrespective of whatever we work in stories. So the problem, if you take a Rajinikanth movie, it's the same thing. You take a Shah Rukh Khan movie, it'll be the same thing. You take an Alia Bhatt movie, it'll be the same. You're all trying to work around the same starting, problem, and end. If you look at the climax of a movie, a lot of climax will be the starting scene of the same movie. So in that way, a storyline is simple. So once you have that in mind, you play with that. It's like saying with just the seven swaras, we have so much of music. So with just 26 alphabets or 24 alphabets, we have so much of language. So just this and the word permutation combination, and we go ahead with it. So that's all I keep. For me, it's when you look at a story, I need to have a starting. I need to have something that shifts that space, and then how do you solve it so that it's like comes back to the safe space. That's it. And that's for me when I keep that. And then I look at, because I'm not a writer, I'm predominantly a storyteller, which means I think from here and I don't even have my notes. I only look at it as flows. So I need to know me. So if it's a straight line, it's not a story. Like let's say that if I go from, let's say I left from my home, I went on the road, I reached, let's say, Bangalore from Chennai, not a story. So when does it become a story? Again, so I start from Chennai, I went, there was a traffic jam, I went to Bangalore, not a story. I started from Chennai, I was going on the road, I saw an ambulance, and then I suddenly stopped to look that there was some chaos and there was a lot of people. And then I stopped the car and went. And that's when I saw that it was an accident. So then you get into disruption, because normal flow, I should have gone from Chennai to Bangalore, and that's all. When that gets disrupted, your story starts. And that's for any writer. I mean, it can be a script writer, it could be a teller, it could be a author. It's the same format.
Fantastic. I think that was very simply defined. I mean, I could never really imagine or think, that a storyline, could actually be that simple, having those three ingredients. Thank you so much for bringing that out. So again, my next question essentially is I've actually been following you lately on social media, and you've actually been doing a lot of workshops. So the content again, varies. So I've actually seen you do a lot of mythological sort of storylines. I've also seen you do a lot of historical sort of storylines. So, what are your sort of preferential, tactics when it actually comes to deriving a good storyline?
So I predominantly, the forms of stories I tell is classical, because I think a lot of today, when you use the word storytelling or even stories, a lot of stories that's happening today is more personal stories. It could be the open mics, it could be the when people just say storytelling, the 99% of people, to revive it or look at it from a contemporary, we only look at personal stories. And but my predominant work of deriving stories would be the classical stories, where I look at history, like how you said, history, mythology, folk, especially, because as a form, we have folk music, we have folk dance, but we don't look at folk tales as something which is cultural. I mean, slowly it sits in books. It's there in lots of books. If you go to a bookstore, you'll find folk tales for this, folk tale for that. But then, unless it comes out, it's not. There's no life, right? I mean, it's like poetry. And the poetry is beautiful if it's yes, you document it's in a book. The moment, unless a human being gives life to it, so that's where I derive most of my connect to, and also my connection, because these stories, for so-called folk tales or classical, have everything that human beings need for life. I mean, it has emotion, it has solution for gender, it has talks about socioeconomic, it talks about ecology, it has everything. But we've slowly closed it, and the Western world has taken it, and we've lost it somewhere. And that's where I derive it from. I mean, so I will generally classify this as classical stories. And how do I bring that into a current context? Because it's also focused also to bring it into a modern in 2020, because it can be myth. I mean, it can be, so even myth has to be contemporized, because unless it's in a new bottle or 2020 relevant, the audience is not going to connect to you, and even I'm not going to connect to it. So old, take it from the old, connect to it, and give it out, and that's the connector I did. I mean, I'm trying to build. I don't know if I answered the question, but that's
No, you
the
did. Thank you so much for that. Now, from a business context, all these enterprises and different businesses and organizations are actually using storytelling now to bring out their value proposition, to bring out what they stand for and what their products and services really stand for, and how sort of beneficial it could actually be to their end customers. So, how do you actually somewhere bridge storytelling into this? So, I was actually reading somewhere on in an article in Forbes, and they actually mentioned that failure to communicate your value propositions in a clear, concise way and in a compelling fashion is essentially very important for businesses, and if they don't do that, their businesses will fail. So do you believe in that?
absolutely, because even if we use technology, we are still connecting to a human being. So it's from a business context, whatever we are trying to work with, it could be from a technical sales, or it could be product sales, or it could be uh, any sector you look at. It can be oil and gas. End of it, we are solving a human problem. and we are trying to convince a human being in between to solve the human problem. So, and every stakeholder in that, it could be the marketing, it could be the sales, it could be the HR. We are just filled with human beings. We're not serving any other person in the world except a human being. And as far as human beings are there, we need to convince. I mean, I think a lot of times we say, "Oh, I can understand a dog better than a human being," and that's still valid in today's time. So sometimes, and also the time that's there with us is also because we start looking at the watch in communication, right? I mean, we say, I only have so much of time, and finish your pitch." So in that limited time, how much do we communicate? I mean, how much do we not communicate also? Because it's also communication is like honey. Too little, too much is also a problem, and that's when storytelling comes back into plays again. I mean, because uh, storytelling is again. I mean, yeah, it's also context relevant. It can't be that I can't be using the same story in some other space. So it's that context. So for this, let me give you another story. So once, let's say, a father and mother were walking with a child, and they were walking, and suddenly the child stops in a shop and looks at the father and mother and says, "Papa, Mama, I want this," and this was a kite. And they bought the kite, and along with the kite, they have to buy something free. I mean, it's like vegetable shop. You go to a vegetable shop, you'll get curry leaves free. So along with the kite, you get something free. You know what that is? What do you get free? The thread. And they got the thread, and they started flying the kite. And the child flew it high, 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 and suddenly felt, I want the kite to fly higher, and let the thread. And when let the thread, the kite was going far, 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 and suddenly it came down and it tore. And the child asked the Papa, Mama, what happened? They said that thread is important, and the thread too much to hold, and you lose it, you will never get, the kite will never fly. So that's the same thing in business. So how much do you communicate, how much you not is so important, because if you hold on and this thing, that also doesn't allow your product to fly high, or your, I mean, when I say product is also your service, and you leave it loose, also it goes away. So that's when it's an invisible thread. That thread has no value, it's zero. That's where the communication is. It's that invisible investment, which has a lot to do with.
Great. I think especially during these times when everything is sort of locked down and businesses are actually hitting rock bottom. I think business as a community, whatever you're trying to sell, in the markets really has to come out with their differential lines of communication. Otherwise, they will actually fail. So, what are your thoughts around that? So, isn't it essential for businesses to come out with regular bouts of communication on what they are up to and how things are sort of shaping up?
Absolutely. Now, because I mean, I think the last few days, I think either we have been reading about some companies, for example, have even increased the salaries of people, to increase the morale of the employees, because, and that's communicating. Like they said, a good leader is someone who communicates at the toughest of times, and that's from a business context is again important. And that's because everybody is a human being. I think as human beings, we like to be communicated, we like to be felt, and communication is just not about even an email. It's about saying, hey, what's up? That one voice of warmth, it makes a difference. And that's constantly, it could be your vendors, it could be your customers, it could be your stakeholders. Everybody needs a hand holding, because everybody, I'm saying the beauty of today's problem is everybody has the same problem. Unlike a national disaster where only some state has an issue, so somebody else can send stuff. Well, here you, everybody is in the same shit. So, but then holding hands together, saying that, so everybody is in a -10 or -20. So it's not that one is -10 and mine. So in that way, that hand holding, I'm saying that, hey, I mean, what's happening? I mean, this is what it is. Now let's travel together. Because I mean, even if you like it or not, today shall pass, tomorrow will come, and that's the beauty in nature. You can't go back, you have to go forward. And that hand holding is communication. And how do we communicate? Depending on how much our access to technology is, how much, because as whatever tools we have. I mean, sometimes it's a phone, sometimes it's online, sometimes it could just be sending a handwritten letter. Because I mean, today we are going back in a lot of ways. I think a lot of CEOs are sending handwritten letters, or handwritten notes to the employees saying, it's okay, we shall pass this, and that gives you confidence, right? I'm saying, I mean, imagine a CEO sending a handwritten note saying, "Dear, uh, let's say Vineet, how I hope you're doing fine," and then an email that itself will feel a warmth. So that's sort of a personal touch. I think it's all the more there today, and we need it. I mean, we are human beings. We need that touch.
Fantastic. Now, one impromptu thought which actually came up in my mind. So when you actually go live and go into the art of storytelling for any session, so do you actually get some sort of a storytelling brain freeze? Is there any term called storytelling brain freeze, if at all?
But like an what do you say, an author's block, writer's
Yeah,
block.
yeah.
The block sometimes does come, but it comes high. So for me, most of my form is improv, so I don't rehearse. So which many people find it very weird. So I, like how I said, I know my starting, I know my middle, I know my ending, and maybe what some the block is something the cultural context. So it's, for example, if I go to certain parts of India, I mean I can't use a certain context of relationship or story. I mean, I'm saying, and so that could be an issue. Like I can't use the word pig in certain parts of India. I can't use mutton in certain parts of India. So when it comes to that, actually I'll say biryani, but I can't use biryani in certain. So that's sort of a freeze. And then how do I replace that? So that's the freeze about. I mean, as far as the stories goes, so the same story if I tell in two places, it'll be very different. I mean, because my audience is different, my energy is different. So that way it's not scripted. It's like the olden, really olden style when I say, "Hey, did you have breakfast? What did you have for breakfast? You had poha?" I will tell you a poha story. Let me go from there. Because in storytelling, it's the teller, I'm the audience, and that's a relationship. So as a performing art, it's the audience is not in darkness. I'm creating that sort of a space. Of course, there is a form where, like theater, I can be on stage, but I've chosen a form when my audience is going to talk to me constantly and do that. And the brain freeze is sometimes like, oh, so that does happen, and then I need to rewind and look at it from a cultural context.
Great. Now, personal branding these days has actually become extremely important, relevant, especially people having access to different social media platforms. They take up to these platforms, and express themselves, pretty well. So somewhere down the line, I think it becomes very important that they bring out storytelling into the fore. Otherwise, it becomes very redundant. So, what are your thoughts around storytelling and building your own personal brand and building that influence?
So today, personal branding is, I mean, with social media being so connected, personal branding is the time. It's what we're doing all the time. I mean, even if you put up a story, we're all. I mean, I'm saying subconsciously we are doing a personal branding because even if not for us, somebody is judging us all the time. We are doing it to others also, right? And I mean, we are looking at others' posts and seeing that, that is why he's putting that. That is why she's putting that. And the human brain is judging all the time. So one way is to see that what do you want to be put up. I mean, that's something that's constant. Do you want my personal life to be put up, or my professional life to be put up? So that's some thought into that, saying that because putting it, the beauty of the social media is the once you put it up, it is there in history forever, unlike before. So which means that once you put up a post, you can delete it, but then somewhere in Google it is sitting there in a memory, and somebody somewhere can view it. And like how, like today, fake news from 10 years old news is coming back, and then people still believe it. So that's a conscious thought that we'll have to take. I'm saying once we look at content, it's also what kind of content is it. My professional content, is it my personal content, and which platform do I use for my personal content and professional content, and do I put everything out? What is that I need to put out? Where do I need to put the bar, and what sort of a frame do I need to put my bar to be viewed at, and what sort of a person do I want to be perceived? And I would say the most easiest thing and the most difficult thing is to be ourselves. And how much ever we try to plan and how do we brand, the moment we are ourselves, the branding will automatically take a turn. A moment we try to put ourselves in a certain way, we can only do that for some time, because somewhere it might, too much of planning is sometimes goes for a toss. So a moment you have an umbrella of branding, saying, okay, this is what my branding is, this is what I want to be looked at, and this is what is me. I mean, that's an internal search that we have to go through. It'll sort of flow in that way. So that's, in today's time, personal branding is Even if we are not looking at it, it is happening all the time. A profile picture in Facebook is a personal branding.
No, true that. So brings me to a very interesting sort of a question. So there is this lady called Sally Hogshead, and she actually brought out a framework called How to Fascinate,
Mm.
and there were essentially seven triggers that she actually mentions of which brings out fascination. So I'll just read out those seven triggers, and you just let me know if they actually sort of align to storytelling in any way. So the ones which she called out was innovation, passion, power, prestige, trust, mystique, and alert. So do you think these are good sort of ingredients and attributes which actually bring in that trigger to fascinate, and could be attributes which can build a good storytelling session?
Absolutely, because I mean, it's also, I mean, like, give me four of the words.
Passion, power, prestige, trust.
Okay, so power is also the voice, as I said, is plays a role in that. So there
Yeah.
is, of course, there has to be passion. I mean, if I'm not telling it in a passionate way, if I'm going to tell it, like imagine those teachers in school. I think that's the greatest example. You'll either have to, each one of us will have two types of teachers. One teacher who's like an angel teacher, who would have been a good storyteller. The second is somebody like a Kali or a Badrakali, who you would have hated in school.
Yeah.
And that's where this passion, the term that you use, comes into play,
Yeah.
because we may not remember the subject the teacher taught, but we'll definitely remember the voice of the teacher, the dress of the teacher, very, 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 very vividly. That's the passion that's the passion that she's talking about. That's relevant all the more today than ever before. And that's subconsciously coming in the way that we are talking, we are sharing, and it's an art form. I mean, it's an art form by itself. So the seven things that she says is there in the as an art form. There is power, because it's also like, look at let's say politicians. I mean, you will see that the best politicians are good storytellers, and they will use a small anecdote somewhere in between, and they'll drift away, and they will not see a paper. You look at the old. I mean, let's look at people who are no longer there, like Vajpayee or Karnanadi or mm, the West Bengal veteran Jyoti Basu, for example. When they talk, they will not see a paper. They will talk directly without a paper for a long time, because it comes from their heart. It comes from their passion. They don't need a paper. But today, even for 10 minutes, you see a lot of people using a paper. So that's the passion, that's the memory, that's the mystique in them. The mystique in them allows them to remember, that allows them to connect beyond paper. I mean, when you see a mystic, any mystic, they won't need a thing. They will talk without that. So that's the connect.
Fantastic. So a little bit about yourself now, Vikram. So I'll actually connect, maybe your journey into my next question a little bit here. So you come from a corporate background, and we actually work for the same organization. So what really influenced you or inspired you into leaving your corporate job and becoming a full-time storyteller?
Um, so long story short, instead of branding a product, I thought, let me brand myself, because that's where I found a little different. So once I had my review, and my managers told me that you should go for a Toastmasters to better your communication skills. So that led me to understand, like, maybe I'm talking in the wrong place, because at the parallel I had a session the next day where I was speaking in a TEDx. I think this was 2014 or 15, in a TEDx. So my thing is, well, at one level this is happening, and one level the other happening. Maybe I'm the wrong space. So which means I don't like to. I mean, as a person, I'm more a person-to-person communicator than a telephone communicator, email communicator, and then again this thing. So like every South Indian, I did my engineering, I did my management, I worked in IBM in consulting, and then I moved to another, SAP on marketing. So in between, I also was trying to do things which was me. So what we call in today's terms passion, because we need that in passion, and we all need three things in our life. One is our financial needs, our emotional need, and a spiritual need, and we do different things at different points of time. Some people get to do this together. The one thing they do for all the three. Some people don't have the option. We do three, four different things. For example, let's say Sachin Tendulkar or A.R. Rahman, they will do all the three together, where they don't have to look at different things for different. And so I was working with animals and birds, which was my childhood interest, and which is still my interest. The other is social work, and I used to do that. So social work, I used to volunteer with. And when I was a child, I was working with Cancer Institute. I was working with differently abled. I was working with the senior citizens. So somewhere this was there a part of my growing up. And as I grew up, I also realized art was entering me in the form of theater. So theater was a form that I was doing. So there was theater, there was conservation, and there was social work, which I used to do parallel to my work. And once you there was building, and of course there was job. You have to go to an office because money is very important in today's time. Because as much as people say that money is not important, money is the base in which we do a lot of things. I guess it's not absolute. You can say it's not absolutely, but then you need it. I mean, it's today's means of connect. I mean, in those days you can say rice. Today you have to say the commodity as connectors. And once with storytelling, what happened was I was able to bring in this together. So I was able to bring theater as a form of performing arts, because as an actor, I couldn't by heart lines. It was getting over my head. And I could bring my conservation and wildlife into it, because that's again in the stories, there is flora and fauna. Because if you look at mythology, you look at folktale, you look at classical stories, you will definitely find that how a country is so beautiful with nature filled. And then social work, because now I can take it into people, I can take it into the same children's space, the senior citizen space, differently able as a form. So all this brought together, and about 5 6 years I did it parallelly with my work. And then when I realized that okay, there can be a financial model to it, because storytelling works for children, storytelling works for corporate, storytelling works for everybody. There is a model that I built, financial sustenance, and I didn't want to start a company, because then there is overhead. In this form I am the one who is relevant, so I may not be able to make as much as the corporate career, but I started with 50%, but today almost I'm reaching about 120%, so on and so forth. And then it'll change, because uh, my market, when I realized the size of the market, that personal branding, that you put that all the same thing, what you do in that thing, I sense it's a large market, and then I was taken that. So which means today I only do storytelling. The audience might differ, the form might differ, but the conservation I love is still there in the storytelling. The theater is there, the social work is there, and the financial is also coming.
Fantastic. That is very well put, Vikram, and very inspiring. Thank you so much. Um from your own journey, I mean, in terms of storytelling, so do you actually sort of train other people as well? Do you run any workshops which are online? I'm sure a lot of people would be enthusiastic about learning the art of storytelling. So it's a lockdown period as well. No longer now. Maybe it's sort of lifting up. But again, people would be interested in immersing themselves into understanding and learning the art of storytelling. So do you run certain workshops or online courses for such people?
I of course I do performances where one can come and watch also, because that's the form of storytelling I do. I
Mhm.
perform stories. Second is in terms of workshop, I currently am doing a master class, which is using the Panchatantra as a text and looking at folk tales to create stories for anybody. It could be a speaker, it could be a manager, it could be a teacher, it could be academics. How do we create stories similar to the folk tale, like how I said about the bird, the two stories I shared, how you create these stories from more understanding perspective using metaphors. So that's the workshop which I'm currently doing. It's called the art of creating stories and folk tales, the Panchatantra way, because the Panchatantra, which has, like, unlike the Mahabharata and Ramayana, which went east and across the world, Panchatantra went to west, and they say one of the most translated work is the Panchatantra, which we've not understood it as much as the West has understood it. And so that's a workshop I do much more deeper in creating stories more consciously. So you can be a writer, you can be a storyteller, you can be an illustrator, but how the creating of stories comes and the form that we, that's what I do. That's the current one that I'm doing in the online world, where the art of creating and then the workshop for storytelling specifically, I've been doing it for very, I mean, close groups. I mean, not as a public, but people have been asking, so I might do one in June where I will open it out, look at it from a basic form of storytelling orally.
Now, I'll be interested in that for sure. So I'll look
Thank
forward to that.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vikram. So, one final parting shot, always my favorite. So, one success mantra for the audience to take away: glum moments, anxious times, pandemic, hitting all of us. So, any success mantra that could actually sort of inspire our audience?
One last story with that I'll leave you.
Great.
So once there was a porcupine, and this porcupine was there in a very hot place, 40 degrees, and suddenly it started becoming a little more colder. So 40 became 30, 30 became 20, 20 became 10, and 10 became 0, minus 10, minus 20, minus 30, and it started to become cold, extremely shivering. And when it became so cold, this porcupine thought it's going to die. And it was like holding back, and suddenly it saw another porcupine somewhere far, and it said, ha ha ha. And one moment you see somebody else also shivering, that the human psyche is like, oh wow, nice. Other person also is in the same situation. And but then they started coming closer to each other. So both the porcupines and shiver came together with each other. And the moment they came together, they started feeling warmer. And when they felt warmer, they said, aha. But as soon as they felt warmer, they also started poking each other because they have the quills with them. And they moved away from each other. But the moment they moved away from each other, it was again cold. The moment they came together with each other, they started feeling warmer. The only thing, they were poking each other. So they decided, let's not be separate, let's be together. Yes, we will hurt and we will bleed, but we'll be together. And that's how they spend the rest of the day. And the humans are also like that. When we come together, we will hurt each other, we will not be nice, but we need each other. And especially in today's times, uh, yes, we are socially distancing, but emotionally we need each other, we need to come together. uh, Especially in homes, when we are all together and we are fighting, we fight for the love of us. So that's all the more important in today's time and the next few months and next few years. uh, let's be together. We will not be the nicest human beings, but we need each other, and that's what I think is important.
Wow, that's a fascinating takeaway. Thank you so much for concluding that with that amazing storyline. Thank you so much for being a part of the Firefly Adda. Yeah, I'm sure the audiences here would actually enjoy our conversation and take away a lot of great insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you for creating such spaces, and to for conversation, and for a lot of people to come and start a journey or look at it as a beautiful path into their life itself. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.